From the Subaru of Gwinnett Studio in the Sonesta Gwinnett Place Atlanta Hotel, it's time for Senior Salute Radio. Senior Salute Radio is presented by the Estate and Asset Protection Law Firm of Victoria Collier.
Hello, and welcome to Senior Salute Radio, presented by the Estate and Asset Protection Law Firm of Victoria Collier. And I am your host, Victoria Collier. Senior Salute Radio brings timely information to leading age boomers and seniors addressing the issues of aging, caregiving, and maintaining quality of life. Today we have a special guest, Steve Capizi, Georgia Chapter President of the Exit Planning Institute, who will be continuing our discussion that we started about business planning and succession planning. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
Oh, absolutely. I just barely touched the surface in the last discussion on business planning, and I wanted to bring in the real expert on this topic so that we could go deeper than I can alone. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you.
Well, for starters, though, before we get into that, share with our listeners who you are and what it is that you do for business owners.
Sure. So I've had a practice for about 24 years and coming alongside business owners and helping them plan out their transition. And in that transition, you have certainly a lot of financial planning that's involved, but also how to get the business ready for that transition. And that comes into getting it in shape, but also increasing the value. Because once you do those types of planning activities, then you have certainly more options as far as what transfer channel, the lady or the man can basically choose, whether it's a third-party sale or an ESOP or transition to the kids.
Okay, and so today we want to talk about specifically maximizing that value when they transition. But before we get into that, what are the different ways that people transition, whether it be voluntary or involuntary?
Oh, wow. Certainly the most traditional is a third-party sale, to an outside party or a private equity group, and also to handing it down to, Sally and Johnny, the kids.
And so, when would be the circumstances like death or divorce or, somebody just wants to retire?
Well, there's a lot of involuntary, situations that come up with owners where it's divorce, certainly a death, with one of the partners. They don't have the capital to continue. It's disability, and of course that's why there's a lot of buy-sell planning that's involved. That's good for the protection of the business.
Okay, and so let's say that when the business owner in their minds feels like they are ready to retire or step back, what needs to take place at that time to maybe maximize their value so that they get the best value out of their business? Are there lots of different things that need to be done, or do you just call a broker and say, hey, I'm ready to sell?
Well, that happens. Definitely it happens. What we like to see is time. Let them have a certain amount of runway, whether it's a year, 2 years, or 3 years, because depending upon the shape of their business, the characteristics of the business, how they've built that business, is really going to think about how much work that needs to be involved in getting that business, positioned for whatever transfer channel that they choose.
And so are there fundamental questions that need to be asked and answered in that process of getting ready?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, obviously, it's all about, the owner's goals and objectives is what's going to drive, what transfer channel they select. And a lot of times, I think, unknowing to the owner, they go to their advisors, and advisors only know what they know.
And so when you talk about advisors, like what kind of advisors?
CPAs, wealth advisors, insurance agents, consultants, within, their industry, et cetera.
Okay. Attorneys, maybe?
Attorneys. Oh, yeah. Attorneys, too.
Let's not forget the attorneys.
No, we don't want to forget attorneys.
Whether they're the right people they're supposed to be going to or not. And what about buyers? Why do buyers buy businesses?
Oh, wow. Buyers buy businesses for a lot of different reasons. One, for financial reasons, they want to get into the business and become their own, man or woman. But others, times they buy business for synergistic type reasons. And that is because they see a certain business model that's out there or a certain territory that they would like to add on to their existing business. So there's a whole variety of reasons, both financially and synergistically, why buyers buy.
And so when we've got a person who owns a business that's ready to sell, and we presume there's buyers out there that want to buy it, and we're talking about maximizing transferable value, does that just mean like increasing their cash flow, or what is that?
Well, obviously, you have to kind of step back and ask, the question is like, what creates value? And what creates value is the future cash flows of a business. But there's an equation, when you really kind of boil it down to it. And, on the top half of the equation is you have your cash flow or economic benefit, or, in the M&A world, we call it EBITDA. But down below, you have the buyer's rate of return that they want for that business. So if you have $1 million EBITDA and they want a 25% return on their money, so you're going to get a $4 million value, right? And a lot of people will focus on trying to increase value of the business, meaning grow revenue, but really the rubber meets the road. The easiest way is to try to reduce the risk in the business, which is going to reduce the rate of return that the buyer is going to want on that business.
Okay, so we are listening to Senior Salute Radio, presented by the Estate and Asset Protection Law Firm, and we are having the pleasure of speaking with Steve Capizi, the Georgia chapter president of the Exit Planning Institute, who is a business consultant who helps businesses get ready to sell their business. Is that correct?
Correct, and
Correct.
also do sell.
And do sell. Not just get ready, but help them sell it, actually. And so we're talking about maximizing their value when they sell it. We're talking about increasing their cash flow, which you've just said is a big part of that is minimizing risk. And so what are the kinds of things in plain language that help us to minimize our risk so that the value in our business goes up?
Yeah, so the concept I like to really get across to business owners is that you want to create a cash flow that is predictable, sustainable, and transferable. And so what that means is that a business value is made up of tangible assets and intangible assets. And these intangible assets are the processes of the business, the characteristics of the business, the model, the let's say IP of the business. And so this really what's create a predictable, sustainable business. But in order to do that, you have to kind of like open the hood, of a car and see, what are the components, that is driving this car. And there are certain types of components that build out a business. Typically, I kind of say there's 8 components, and you have to ask a whole lot of questions within each of these categories of that business to find out, where the risk lies within that's going to impact, it not to be sustainable and predictable for the potential buyers.
And so I'm going to want to get into those 8 components, but before we do that, can't we just look at financial statements just to see that, how strong the business is? Isn't that alone a good enough indicator as to what the value of the business is?
Well, financial statements, they do tell a story, and they tell a story whether there is financial strength or if there's, certainly problems, within the business. But to kind of give you an example, so let's just look at financial statements, income. And let's say you have $10 million of revenue top line. Well, in that $10 million of revenue top line, is it a diversified, customer base, or out of that $10 million of top line revenue, you have 40% comes from one customer. So that in of itself is a risk that's not shared, when just looking through the financial statements.
And so as we go and talk about the different 8 categories to help a business maximize their value, get it ready to sell, and actually do sell it, can you explain that by using an example of a company that you've done that very process with and go through each of those 8 components as to, what was strong, what was weak, how you could make it stronger, and the result of that?
Sure. Well, so the 8 components, basically that I kind of look at are planning. What type of planning, have they done? Most business owners don't have a plan. Then you move to leadership. Go ahead.
Okay. So either go deeper now as you're going through it, or make sure you do it when you go through the example of the story. Because planning, that's such a vague word, for example. I mean, I sit here and I plan all day long. Some would call that a dreamer, So, either go deeper now as you explain all these, or make sure that when you give us your example of walking through how you've actually done it with a real business, and I know you've done hundreds of businesses, I want to make sure that our listeners really understand what we mean by each of these words.
Sure. Well, I'll just rattle off right now the 8 categories, and then we'll kind of come back.
Perfect.
Is that okay?
Yep.
All right. So planning is one that I just mentioned. Then we have leadership. Okay. The leadership of the owner and the management team. Then you have the people. People what make the business work. Handling the processes. Then you have the marketing component, the sales component, operations, and finance and legal. And you mentioned earlier about just looking at the finance. And most business owners, what they do is, if they're going to prepare for a exit or transition, as we call it, they may go to a CPA. And so if you really think about it, that CPA is going to handle the finance part really good. They're going to make sure all the debits and credits are in the right places, got nice, beautiful financial statements, everything's in order. But when you look at the other 7 parts of it, there may be risk involved in there that is really going to devalue the business. And then if you even go to our attorneys that we love.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we do.
They're going to get the governance, all worked out, right, and aligned. But then again, if you just go to an attorney, then, you're not going to be able to get all the full ranges. So circling back with planning, every business needs to have a strategic operational plan. And when buyers come in, they want to know where that owner is going so that they can have confidence in what their business model is so that they can go ahead and acquire.
So with the planning, that would be like planning to make sure you have all your documents are tied up the way they should be.
No, not really. It's more of an operational plan, meaning that, there's a vision, there's a mission, within the company. There's values within the company. You do a SWOT. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, operation. Then you also are going to look at, what is the strategic objectives of the company, and then what are the tactics, and then what are the actions, and and go down through that. So you want to really build out how to accomplish what the business owner team wants to accomplish in that business.
Right, so kind of like the business owner's blueprint of our vision, our mission, and how to carry those things out.
Correct.
From an operational standpoint through your people. That is another category.
Right, people. I mean, obviously, some business owners, and this kind of gets into a little bit of the leadership thing, they want to control, and that's kind of what makes them special. They're out there and they got their head down and they're, on that entrepreneurial highway and they want to control everything. But in order to really create a more valuable business, you really need to decentralize, create a management team, turn it over to the people that you believe in that can have the right skill sets to execute, each facet, of the company for yourself. And so, the right people in the right seats.
And I would imagine that as a business owner who wants to ensure that what they've created, their baby that they've birthed and raised from a business standpoint, and they want to leave their legacy, you don't want to just sell that to people you don't know unless you have created a management team and others that are going to continue your vision from the beginning.
Oh, absolutely. And business owners are very prideful for that legacy. And in telling them that they really need to work their way out of, management, sometimes it's frightening to them because they want to have their hands on it, but it's the best thing that they can possibly do. So you want the owner to be able to, leave for 60 days, and when they come back, everything is just, fine and dandy.
Last year in 2018, I did that very thing, except it wasn't 60 days in a row. It was 30 days in the beginning of the summer, and it was 30 days in the fall. And oh my gosh, what an eye-opener it was the first 30 days. My firm, you don't know how strong or weak your firm is until you leave. and my staff had zero access to me other than emergency access, and that was defined very clearly. And you find all your weak spots for sure. When I left and did the same thing in the fall, I can't say things were perfect, but they sure were a lot better after we learned from the first experience. And I think that all business owners should do that, whether they're planning to transition out or not. It just shows you so much, the good and the not so pretty about your own business.
Right. And also, when you think about it, it's not only people, but it's the processes you set up within that, in your organization that keeps, everybody walking the same, beat. So it's very important to have a business that's very process-oriented, that is documented. And so when someone leaves, you can come back and train them and get them back in and not miss a beat.
You are listening to Senior Salute Radio, presented by the Estate and Asset Protection Law Firm of Victoria Collier. And Steve Capizi is explaining to us how we can increase the value of our businesses if we plan to transition or not. And right now, we're going over the 8 components of a business that can be improved, that improve the value and the sellability of a business. We've talked about planning, we've talked about people and operations through systems, and you talked about leadership a little bit. Is there any more you want to talk about that, or can we talk about marketing and sales and why that's important?
Well, kind of going back to the planning part, the leadership, there needs to be clear communication from the top down of what expectations are on a daily basis as to what your job is, and then also what the mission of the business really is, so that they can see if this is something that they want to do or not want to do.
And speaking of communication, I have heard over and over when a business owner is planning to sell that they bring in a potential buyer and they say, "Don't tell anyone, nobody knows." And so that's not a whole lot of communication. Can you discuss a little bit about, how that can impact the overall sellability?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. So, as I take a business owner through a process of selling their business, obviously confidentiality is a must. And, people, by their very nature, they don't like change, and so they get scared. And so we keep the whole process very confidential to the very end, on a need-to-know basis. And sometimes we'll include, the CFO and the CPA, involved in that process. But as far as, some of the, workforce, they don't need to know until it happens, because anything can happen in an M&A transaction.
Okay, and when you say M&A, you've said that a couple times now. Not everybody who's listening will know what that is. What does that stand for?
It's really slang jargon for the sales side business brokering industry. Mergers and acquisitions is what it's called.
Okay, and so what about on the financial side? Is it more than just looking at your finances to make sure everything's in order and you don't have 2 sets of books, one for the IRS and one for yourself? Does it go beyond that?
I didn't say that.
No, I mean, but we've all seen companies who have that. Does it go more in depth from, a business owner that thinks that, hey, I want to get, $20 million out of this business, and it might only be worth $3 million, and so it's helping them have a financial reality?
Well, so on the finance part of it, it's very critical for you to have good financial statements, because that's what the buyer's actually going to see. And so basically you have 4 types of financial statements. You have management prepared, you have compiled, reviewed, and audited. Now, obviously, a lot of businesses can't, provide audited statements because of the cost that's prohibited, et cetera. But it's good to have an attorney to come in, attorney and also, CPAs come in and, look up underneath and make sure that the financials are in order, they're correct and accurate. But more importantly, like there's a client that I'm working with up in Memphis, and 32 million in sales, great business, EBITDA, meaning earnings, are around 4.5 million, and they have a 15-year-old, bookkeeper, which what I'm saying is that they have grown with the business.
The bookkeeper's been there 15 years. The bookkeeper's not 15 years old.
Correct.
All right, got it. Okay.
A little Freudian slip there. So yes, so she's been there. She's done a great job, but basically now she's a little bit over her skis as far as handling and having the proper controls in that size of organizations. Receivables have kind of drifted a little bit, and so they're on a QuickBooks system, and they probably need to graduate up to have more control over it. So we're working with them into creating a better financial system for them to control their business.
Kind of like, what got you here is not necessarily what's going to get you to that next step.
Correct.
And so what about the legal components, the eighth component here? I know lawyers and legal stuff are always considered last. So go ahead and let's at least close out this part. What do businesses need to consider on the legal side? Well,
certainly if you have contracts with customers, that's always good to have in place, because that presents more of a reoccurring type revenue, and that kind of translates into more of a sustainable, predictable cash flow. But when you look at the agreements, are the agreements with your supplier in order? Are they executed right? I've seen situations where, documents are not executed, and it's a type situation where you kind of have to go back and clean that up. Also, too, IP, intellectual property. That kind of falls into the whole legal side of it. Are you properly protected, with your trademarks, with your proprietary, products that you may have, or your systems, et cetera? So it's very important for companies to really kind of step back and see if there is any opportunity to really trademark or copyright their processes.
Which would certainly increase their value if they've got all this intellectual property they haven't secured.
Absolutely.
Right. So walk us through a hypothetical client in what you do on a daily basis to help. Start with, who you get the call from, how people even know that you're out there that can do this, from who you get the call from to what your first encounter with that client sounds and looks like, and how you assess, and then, in a hypothetical business that you've helped, walk us through some of the issues that they had and some of the solutions that helped them.
Sure. So I'll give you an example. Back in last December, I got a call from a business owner and said, "Hey, Steve, know what you do. I've heard about you. I have an unsolicited, offer from a private equity group."
So his business wasn't for sale, but somebody wants to come and buy him.
Correct.
Okay.
And I said, "Well, what have you done?" And they said, "Well, I went ahead and signed a non-disclosure with them." And I'm like, "Okay, well, did you give them any information?" "Yes, I gave them some information." And I'm like, "Okay."
And the non-disclosure was probably prepared by the other side, right?
Correct. Correct. And so I said, "Well, what's happened thus far?" And he said, "Well, darn it, like 2 weeks after I, gave him my financial statements, I learned that they bought my competitor." So when you really kind of think about it now, is that his financial statements are with the competitor now.
Right.
So, we really need to get those calls, ahead of time before any business owner does it, which kind of led into the whole conversation with them, like, well, what are your goals and objectives? And when you start, peeling back, the layers, he really shouldn't have ever been talking to a private equity group from the beginning, because his goals and objectives just don't line up with that type of opportunity. And so as we were getting into it, he said, "Hey, Steve, I want a $10 million exit, in a certain amount of time." And so we start, working on, okay, well, how many assets you got outside the business? What's the current value of your business right now? Are you going to be able to meet those long-term goals? And so what we have to do is assess that business and find out what is the value, but also what are the strengths and weaknesses, to see if we can't increase that value and meet his time horizon.
And so this sounds like the perfect situation in that he wasn't thinking about selling, but because somebody was asking him to sell, it got him thinking about selling, And when I say the perfect situation, I mean for you as the advisor, because now you can set it up properly from the beginning with that time horizon. What is a good time to begin before realistically selling it at the value it should be sold for?
Sure, great question, and it's going to vary really with the business. Some businesses are very strong and they need some things to be cleaned up. Others, they need a whole heck of a lot of work. But really, when you kind of look at it, we kind of say about a 1 to 3 year time period in order to do it right, because we're going to be getting estate planning attorneys involved to clean up anything from their estate standpoint. We get wealth advisors involved. We get CFOs involved, to clean up the financials. So there's a lot of activity that comes into getting that business ready.
And it sounds like you all work as a team of advisors versus individuals doing their own thing.
Correct. I can remember, in the day, when you talk about collaboration, no one was into that. Everybody was operating in their silos from an advisor standpoint. Now, today, no one knows it all. And so you have to bring in talent, from the other side, to help build out a business owner team to basically accomplish what the business owner really wants to accomplish.
And I tell you, as a lawyer, I don't want to know it all, that's for sure. But when we're talking about teams like that, it also sounds like a lot of expense. And so share with our listeners, what's the value other than just now I'm able to sell my business? What if I don't have that whole team? And what am I generally, what you observe happens to my business versus when I have my team of advisors, what the result is then?
Sure. I'll answer it in two different ways. One is a lot of times owners will get unsolicited offers, as I mentioned before. So they get all excited. On the other side of the table, they slide over a nice big letter of intent, and then they start going through the due diligence process. And the owner is just not ready for that due diligence. So certainly the other side is going to come in and have this team that is going to look up underneath the hood, and they're going to start finding stuff. And when they start finding stuff, they start whittling down the purchase price. And it just becomes a messy type of experience for the owner, very taxing from an emotional standpoint. And the owner is like, well, I can't sell my business for that. Or they go ahead and sacrifice and with the deal and really made a bad deal. So it's always good to be prepared. And so what I kind of tell business owners is that what we're trying to do is do reverse due diligence way ahead of time. So when you do get that call, you are deal ready and prepared to present your business. But also too, with that, you may say cost. Well, so let's say we get a owner on the front end, and they want to really increase the value of their business to meet their number. Well, when you really start thinking about if a business owner has $1 million EBITDA, earnings of the business, and right now from a value standpoint it's $4 million, but we can increase it to $5 million. That's $1 million, right?
Right.
So
more money in the pocket. Exactly.
So if they if they incur an expense of, let's just say, $300,000, wouldn't you say that's a pretty good ROI?
So as an example, if the whole team was $300,000, I've increased the business by an extra $1 million that I never knew how to do without my team.
Right.
Absolutely, that's a great return.
Right.
I can tell you that I made an effort to buy another law firm in the last few years who wanted to sell, who wanted to retire. And it happened exactly like your first scenario in that, she hadn't done anything to massage any of these 8 categories you've got. As a sole practitioner with 1 assistant, so no leadership after she was gone. No processes and systems, just some software that lawyers use, and so when going through and assessing the value, again, it was just like you said, it was chipping away at that asking price, and ultimately the deal fell through, you know. And don't most deals fall through?
A lot of deals do fall through, and it's all about deal preparation and setting the owner's expectations accordingly. And so that's why when you're doing a whole lot of questioning up front, discovery, finding out where that owner wants to go, you can basically give them answers as to how to get there.
Are there certain types of businesses that lend themselves more towards successful sales than other types of businesses?
I would say yes. And before I would probably say, no. But yes.
But you're older and wiser now.
I'm older and wiser now, yes. There is so many buyers in the marketplace nowadays. With the creation of private equity has grown to over 3,000 firms, and everybody has their investment mandate, as far as what types of businesses that they want to go after. I've just incurred, one private equity group that is highly interested in construction type companies. And before, construction was, just really not very desirable, only because it was very transaction oriented, and also from the economy standpoint, very cyclical. So, to answer your question, I think everything's up for sale almost today.
Okay. And what are your perfect type of businesses to work with?
I like manufacturing, distribution, service businesses. I really enjoy working with, the baby boomer clientele for the purpose of they've held their business for years, and, they've really contributed to our economy. Let's face it, almost half of the GDP is from, lower middle market business owners. And really helping them achieve their goals so they can kind of, play at the beach with their grandkids.
So how can our business owners contact you so that if they are within 1 to 5 years of wanting to get out of their business through retirement or otherwise, how can they reach you, Steve?
Well, certainly they can call 678-242-5250 is the office number. And also the website is www.apetsit.com. And my email is steve@apetsexit.com.
And if there were one thing you think business owners should know in general or about you and your business, what's that one thing you'd want to leave them with today?
Trustworthy.
Trustworthy? Excellent. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You have been listening to Senior Salute, which is a bi-monthly show bringing timely information for leading age boomers and is available 24/7 online by visiting businessradiox.com and selecting Senior Salute. I want to thank you and our special guest, Steve Capizi, and our listeners. We salute you.